Hebrews chapter 11 and verse number 30. With me, please. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. God bless you. You may be seated. May the Lord add a blessing unto those who are the readers. Truly unto those who are the hearers of his holy and his divine will. This morning we want to talk about the fact by faith the walls of Jericho fell down. We want to deal with the subtype when walls come tumbling down. When walls come tumbling down. The next act of faith that we're going to examine here in Hebrews chapter 11 is once again brought to us by the children of Israel. Upon last week we looked at the fact that God for his children had made a way out of no way when he allowed them to cross the Red Sea on dry land. We read about the mighty power of God as he had delivered his people from the hand of Pharaoh and ultimately from the Egyptians' taskmastery. Here at the present, the children of Israel are free from Pharaoh. They have been loosed from the bands of slavery, and they're on their way to the promised land. Moses at this time is no longer with them, but Joshua is now the new leader, and their success and victory still lies in the power of God. After they had crossed the Jordan River, they came to a city called Jericho. Jericho was also known as the city of palm trees, and it was in fact this particular city that God through the Israelites was going to overthrow. The inhabitants of Jericho had heard about the wondrous works that God had done for the children of Israel, and quite frankly Jericho was afraid. They knew that the God of heaven and earth fought for and took care of his people, and just to fathom the thought that the same God who destroyed the Egyptians are coming this way made them shake and tremble in their shoes. When you look with me at Joshua chapter 6 and beginning at verse number 1, we are told to what extent the inhabitants of Jericho went to keep Israel out of their walls. The Bible says in Joshua chapter 6 and beginning at verse number 1, now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. What they did was they had put a lockdown on the city. It had the city shut up. They had closed the gates. They had secured any and every entrance way into the city of Jericho. They wouldn't allow anybody in, and they wasn't allowing anybody to go out. They had the entire city on lockdown. Now notice what God says here in verse number 2. And the Lord said unto Joshua, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. Notice here that God speaks to Joshua as if what he's getting ready to do has already happened. God didn't say, I'm getting ready to give you Jericho. God didn't say, I'm going to give you Jericho. God says, I have given you Jericho. Yes, sir. And the king and the mighty men of valor. It shows us the significant fact that God is able to call that which is not as though it's already happened. And that's what you need to understand in dealing with God by faith. Because God is who he is, and because he always deals with the present, God doesn't speak as if he's going to do it. Because God is always present, God speaks as if it's already taken place. Now look at here. Now we're understanding that you also need to understand with God. If God has spoken to something in our lives as if it's already taken place and you don't see it yet, hello, then that means there's still something that you must do to get what God has already given you. It's not the fact that he hasn't given it. He's already given it. He said, Joshua, I've given you Jericho. I ain't about to give it to you. You already got it. I'm not getting ready to give it to you. You already got it. But now in order to get it, in order to possess it and obtain it, there's something that you got to do. Right? Watch this. Now this right here gonna bless you. Watch this. Verse number 3. Verse number 3. Watch this. And ye shall compass or surround the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. And the 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass or march around the city. That's what the word compass means. It means to surround the city, to march around the city 7 times on the 7th day. And the priest shall blow with the trumpets, and it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horns, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat. If you're looking at this with me, you notice that this is not your ordinary measure of conquering a city. This particular thing that God is doing with them is nothing short of the miraculous power of God's wonder and his working. Notice here that God informs them to do something, not with swords and spears, not with battering rams and bulldozers. God tells them, you're going to conquer the city, but you're not going to conquer it in your usual method of conquering. I don't want you to go up against them like an army that you're going to overthrow the city. After all, God said, I have given you Jericho. So it really ain't you getting the city. It's God giving you the city. And so since God is operating like that, you're not going to get it in your usual way. This also shows us God's ability. This shows us God's way of doing things that are sometimes not our way of doing things. God can get some stuff done in a very unusual and mysterious way. God's ways are not our ways. God's thoughts are not our thoughts. And there may be something that you're trying to accomplish this morning. There might be a wall you're trying to knock down. There might be some obstacle that's standing in your way, and you have gone about it the conventional way of doing it, and your wall's still standing up. Well, see, when you put it in God's hand and let God tear your wall down, you'll get it. But you ain't going to get it like you had planned on getting it. Because God don't always work toward the usual. There are many times in the Bible that God has shown us that he doesn't work with the ordinary, but God works with the extraordinary. I mean, when Naaman wanted to be cured of leprosy, leprosy made him dirty and filthy up under the old law because he was unclean. And when God wanted him to be clean, he sent the prophet unto him and didn't tell him to dip in the clean rivers of Abiathar or Papa. He told him to go down to the old muddy dirty waters of Jordan and did dip in Jordan. And once he